If you like roller coasters, then you probably have enjoyed the ride of chapters 8 and 9. Jesus was declared to be the Christ, the King, and the apostles are excited thinking, all right, he's going to restore everything and he's set on the throne of Israel. But then Jesus tells them his purpose, that he's going to suffer and die. And the apostles, like Peter, they were having none of it. But then 6 days later, he takes 3 of his apostles up on top of this mountain where he displays his majesty and his glory. And now they're walking back down the mountain, and Jesus is having this discussion with Peter, James, and John. And he's trying to explain to them that suffering comes before glory. And so we're in Mark chapter 9 and verse 9. Now as they came down from the mountain, he commanded them that they should tell no one the things that they had seen, till the Son of Man has risen from the dead. And so they kept this word to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. And they asked him, saying, why did the scribes say that Elijah must come first? Then he answered and told them, indeed, Elijah is coming first and restores all things. And how is it written concerning the Son of Man that he must suffer many things and be treated with contempt? But I say to you that Elijah has also come, and they did to him whatever they wished, as it is written of him. Jesus is coming back down the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and he's telling them, he says, I know you just saw me in all my majesty, but don't you go telling anybody any of this. And I don't know about you, this is not the first time in Mark, but every time I read that, I think, oh, come on, that's not very fair. If I had just seen what they saw, I don't know very many people, but I'd want to go to everybody that I could. At least this time he says, not yet. Because there's going to come a time when he'd return and he'd tell them to go into all of the world and tell every living creature. In fact, that's how we know. We have this eyewitness account, probably from Peter's perspective of the events that took place. He promised that after the resurrection, they could go and tell everybody. But the problem is they didn't understand what that was. See, the Jews, they believed in a final resurrection, a day in which everybody would be raised from the dead. But they didn't kind of grasp this idea of a man being put to death and 3 days later being raised from his grave. And so it's no wonder Jesus told them not to go and tell everybody, because they didn't really understand a lot of the things that Jesus had been telling them. And so they also had this question about Elijah. They said, well, why did the prophets say that Elijah must come first? Remember, Elijah had been taken up by the fiery chariot, so he didn't die. But the prophets, like in Malachi 4, verse 5, said that Elijah would come first. And so the scribes were teaching that before the end, Elijah was going to come. And the apostles are thinking, all right, we just saw Elijah on top of the mountain. Is there any connection in all of this? And Jesus tells them Elijah would come first, and he had come. The problem is they didn't know who Elijah was. See, John the Baptist was Elijah. And just as John the Baptist had been mistreated and suffered, so would Jesus. And so would the apostles. Because that's the pattern. The suffering comes before glory, that the cross comes before the crown. And that's the pattern for us as well. That if we take up our cross and we follow after him, if we lose our life in this life, then there's a promise of a future glory. That in the same way that Jesus was raised from the dead to the glory of sitting at the right hand of the Father, so will one day we be raised from the dead to a glory of being in the presence of God.